Hello?
Oh, are you eating?
Okay, if you're like getting a PhD and the people, you have to, whatever, the people judging you are people who know what they're doing, like definitively. They have some kind of criteria, some kind of credentials, some kind of something that gives them validity and expertise in their field that is in some way objective. Whether like if you get a note that's bad or something that isn't clicking for people, like is that a shortcoming of your storytelling or your like performance or whatever the hell you're doing? Is it a shortcoming on your end? So in some way, or is it just that they don't get you? There's a weird thing that happens where I think like the more specific you are, the more relatable you actually become, because it's in the specifics and the honesty of that people can relate. We had a little short that we done, and we had, like I said, all these scripts and all these things that were in various stages with things, but nothing that we were able to actually finally like do. So that's kind of what DisGraced was born out of. We're like, okay, cool. If we make it a web series, that's something that we can, short little bite-sized things. Very achievable for us, very doable for us. Also really fun to write because in a lot of ways the fact that it's a web series format kind of frees you up. You're not beholden to the very narrow, strict format of TV, which is kind of nice. Like we could tell it, and we could take some risks with our storytelling, and we could kind of be a little looser with that. So that was really fun. So yeah, it was definitely born out of the desire to be able to like seize control of something and just do what we wanted without having to ask anybody for permission, or without trying to convince anyone to believe in us, to just do it ourselves. I like really dark, angsty drama, and I like comedy. And I think that they go well together. I think that they lend themselves to each other. I feel like when you're dealing with really dark subject matter, you need that humor to break it up. And I feel like humor allows you to kind of tackle some issues that you wouldn't otherwise be able to tackle. Especially nowadays, unfortunately, our sense of humor is like shriveling away and dying. No one has a sense of humor about anything anymore, but I feel like comedy is still one of the last bastions where people are kind of able to tell their truth the way they want to without being so worried about the consequences of that. So yeah, for me, I think it's more about that. It's more about like the freedom that it gives you from a storytelling standpoint. People's reactions have been very drastically different to some certain episodes, like especially Dumb Slut, that episode, people have very different opinions on. Like some people think it's so funny, and some people think it's like impossible to watch. So it goes both ways. For me, I think it's both. I think it's uncomfortable as hell, and I think it's also funny. Okay, so that episode for me, I think is Once Beautiful Woman, which I think is the third episode in the series. The kind of meat of DisGraced, which is really kind of about like the latent sexism that she's constantly facing, and just the kind of the transactional nature of the business, in that people are only as nice to you as what you can do for them. So like the way you're treated is directly proportional to how important you are, or like how high up on the totem pole you are. And so, Grace is, fallen from Grace, and so no one's treating her like she's low man on the totem pole, so she's not getting respect. Okay, so Grace Green is like a girl who was a Hollywood it girl for like 0.2 seconds. She was not even really a has-been, she's like an almost was. So she got cast in the third installment of a franchise, like a big action franchise. And, it's supposed to be the next Hollywood it girl. She's still on the red carpets, doing all these interviews, woo, yay, made it, finally made it. And then the movie tanks, it's a critical failure, it's a commercial flop. And she's kind of the person who's blamed for that, as often is the case, right? So while her like male co-star goes on to have this illustrious career and like, be kicking butt in all these action movies and winning Sexiest Man Alive multiple times, she's like persona non grata. So our whole show takes place basically 5 years later, where she's basically still trying to kind of claw her way back up to what she had. And you see in a lot of ways the fact that she had this kind of brief almost success is actually more of a hindrance than it is a help to her, because it comes with all the stigma and stuff attached to it. So yeah, so she's basically an actress, struggling away, trying to make it, and dealing with kind of a barrage of mistreatment. And she's also the kind of the theme that we wanted to kind of explore in season 1, and kind of actually as the show, if we do subsequent seasons as it goes on, was kind of the importance of being an active participant in your own life versus just kind of letting things happen to you. So Grace is actually, to me, very passive in most of the first season. It doesn't really take control and take some initiative for herself until the end of it. And I think that's very common for us. It can be really easy to just kind of like let life happen to you instead of actively trying to make things happen. It's also really hard because I think it also explores this thing that is doubly hard if you're a woman and doubly hard if you don't have power, which is that there's a really fine line between standing up for yourself and coming off like a super bitch. So it's like you don't want to alienate someone who has this power to give you a job or to give you something that you want. You know, you have to be polite and respectful, but how much are you going to take? You know what I mean? Where's that line where you can sit there and take it and grin and bear it because you're hoping that like you will get something out of this, you know, you will get the job you want, you will get the opportunity you want, you will get something, versus being like, fuck it, you know, telling someone to fuck off, right? Like, I think we all kind of can relate to that in various ways in terms of how people treat you and what you're willing to like take, how much you're willing to take. So episode 3 is Once Beautiful Woman, and Grace gets an audition for, you know, a small role, her agent says, in the big studio feature. So no character name, but the character's name is basically Once Beautiful Woman. So she's like, oh, cool, at least I have an adjective, you know, I get to play a beautiful woman, great. So she goes to audition, you know, all dolled up as one would for an audition for the role of Once Beautiful Woman. And then she gets there and she's sitting in the waiting room and she's taking stock and looking around her and she's realizing, you know, these other girls are not exactly dressed up. They're pretty dressed down. They're looking pretty bummy, actually. So she's wondering, you know, why she's the only girl, you know, dressed to the nines. So she kind of sneaks a peek at the sign-in sheet, and she sees that everyone else isn't signed in for beautiful woman. They're signed in for Once Beautiful Woman, meaning no longer beautiful. So she sneaks away to the bathroom and calls her agent and tries to get to the bottom of it. You know, did you give me the wrong sides or whatever? And her agent, who's a lovely woman, in typical fashion, is like, it's not my mistake. You know, deal with it. So she, you know, goes to talk to the receptionist to ask her, you know, who they wanted to see, what role they wanted to see her for. And so the receptionist is like, oh, you know, what role do you have? And she's like, beautiful woman. And the receptionist is like, I don't think so. You're here for Once Beautiful Woman. So she, like, you know, washes her makeup off, throws her hair in a bun, goes to find a bummy, smelly t-shirt from her car to put on, and comes back and, you know, digs some crumpled up sides from some other actress out of the cushion of the couch in the waiting room and reads the lovely sides that she has, which I won't spoil that for you. I gotta watch the episode. So yeah, and then proceeds to give her audition. We actually wrote 10 and we only filmed 8 because of money reasons, so we, you know, cut 2 of the ones that were that required a little bit more from us monetarily, so we went with an 8-episode season. Then one of the trickiest parts, I think, of doing independent and low-budget filming is locations. Locations. It can be really, really pricey. It can add so much to your production, you know, the production value to have good locations. So we kind of had to brainstorm, and we paid for the location, which is called the Work Bar, for 2 Ice Cubes, the date episode. Everything else was loaned to us. I'm a big believer in paying people. Yay, paying people. Obviously, we wish we were rich and had tons of money, which we do not, and did not have a big budget for this. So we were very lucky that people were like super generous and cut their rates and, you know, loaned us those locations and stuff like that. But so we paid what we could. We kind of figured out a budget, you know, what would you be willing to do this for our whole crew, and had an idea of what we needed. We did a little Indiegogo campaign to raise some money for that. And we filmed, we had 8 episodes. I think it was pretty much an episode a day. We did end up going back to shoot an extra series like on the rooftop of one location on a separate day. So I think maybe we had like 8.5 days of filming. My writing partner is also an editor, so he cut his episodes that he directed. The ones that I directed, my husband actually cut those episodes. And then Frankie, our DP, who directed 2, he cut his own episodes. Then we had to get sound design done, you know, to make sure the levels are all good, and add the Foley and make sure that's all dope. Music placement, stuff like that. And then, ta-da, we have a series. And then we had to decide, are we waiting until COVID's done to release this to the world and see what happens? Or we're just gonna like put it out there? And I was like, well, everyone's stuck at home bored, and let's just share it with the people. So we set it free. So I've gotten some really funny reactions, which I think are great. Like there's this producer that we met in this like producer forum, and he was like, I've never seen somebody look so beautiful and so hideous in like such a short amount of time. So that was a great piece of feedback. What's hard as a creator and an artist is when you put something out there and you get some feedback back that shows that people just don't get it. Like they just clearly were not picking up what you were putting down. One person who had watched it for this other thing that we were doing was like, oh, I just don't understand, like, he thought that Grace was both like mean, he found her mean, and he found that she didn't stand up for herself enough, which I thought was weird that you would find both things to be true. But yeah, it was kind of clear to me that like with that feedback, he just like didn't really get it and get her. So that was kind of a bummer. You know, it's obviously you hope that like what you're doing will connect with people, that they will relate to it, and that they will like get it, so to speak. I also had a guy call me He was like, you were like undeveloped beachfront property. He's like, someone's just gonna snatch you up and like make it rich. And I was like, that's really nice feedback. So that was a really nice compliment. I like to be called undeveloped beachfront property. Give me more of that. I think it's important to kind of, whenever you're making something, period, to have an idea of why you're doing it, right? Are you doing it because you're hoping that you're gonna make money? Is this gonna be a monetary thing for you? Are you gonna, be a big money maker? Or is this just a way to put your work out there, to serve as a calling card, as a visual example, like a much more fun to read resume? What are you doing with this? Like, what's the point of it? So with a web series, it's not like a feature. There's not really a way to monetize it so much, other than, a network wanting to pick it up and have us develop it into a half-hour, actual thing for TV, which we would obviously be open to. So we kind of made this with the idea that we wanted it to be a calling card for us and just to be an example of our POV and what we can do with no money and whatever. So imagine what we can do with money. And so we really just wanted to be able to put it out there and share it with people, to have an example of like, hey, what have you been up to? This is what I've been up to. Like, this is the thing that I've done. So then hopefully when we are in meetings, about other projects and stuff, it can help kind of flesh it out, and serve as a kind of finished product of what we can do and like what our kind of style is like.
She was no longer Lexi.
It is the epitome of an experimental film because it has literally been experimenting from start to finish. So it is kind of like American Murder meets Paranormal Activity. It is kind of a mockumentary found footage horror film, comedy, yes. So we will see what happens. That's kind of what we have in the mix.